Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the United Nations World Food Program, commonly called WFP? What is WFP doing to help people in Syria, the Philippines, and many other areas around the world to provide assistance to them because their lives have been disrupted? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're taking a look at the United Nations World Food Program and the assistance it's providing to literally tens of millions of people around the world. My guest today is an expert on the World Food Program. My guest today is Ms. Bettina Luescher. Bettina Luescher is the chief spokeswoman for the United Nations World Food Program. Ms. Luescher, a German national, has worked in crisis areas such as Darfur, Afghanistan, and the tsunami region. Before joining the United Nations, Ms. Luescher worked for 15 years as an anchor, reporter, and field producer for CNN. Bettina Luescher, welcome to Global Connections Television.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
It's been too long. It's good to see you again. Let's get right into it. The UN World Food Program. What exactly is it? When was it formed? Why was it formed? What's your main mission?
Yes, we are the largest aid organization in the world. We take care every year of some 90 million people in 70 countries. And if you translate that to the population of the United States, it's as if we almost took care of every third American. So you can see what a huge task this is. We go to disaster areas that are in the headlines. We are in Syria, Iraq, South Sudan, everywhere where, it's burning at the moment. But we're also in places that are never in the headlines. So we make sure that people get good, healthy, nutritious meals, whether there's a drought, whether there's war, whether there's an economic crisis, we're there to help.
You are on the front lines, to put it mildly. Many of your workers are really in harm's way every day. I'm not just in Syria, but in many other places around the world, are they not?
Yeah, and especially Syria is one of those places that is, our most complex, most difficult emergency crisis where we're helping at the moment. We take care of more than 4 million Syrians inside of the country, almost 3 million this year, refugees that have fled to other countries. And it's such a challenging operation. Just to give you a scale of the magnitude, every month there are 3,000 trucks that bring food to people in the war zone inside Syria. Sometimes these trucks have to cross 50 crossing points, checkpoints. Before we can go, we have to negotiate with all sides for access, let everybody know, listen, we are coming, we are the humanitarians, let us through, let us be safe. But nevertheless, our people have come under mortar fire, have been ambushed, attacked. It's a dangerous business, but we know that, the survival of the people depends on us. So our people on the ground just keep on going ahead.
Exactly. And if our viewers would like to contribute to the World Food Program, they can go to www.wfp.org and get more information about the program that we're talking about today, the issues, and also to contribute, which is a donation is tax deductible, which is even better. So that's that's a bright spot, or a brighter spot, shall we say.
And it's also so important, because it's so important because you can do, even with something little, you can have a huge impact.
Exactly.
If you just give $5, you can feed a kid in Africa for a month. $5. That's what you and I pay here for a fancy cup of cappuccino at Starbucks in New York City. So think of just how much difference you can make. We don't just need billionaires, and we don't need prime ministers and kings and all of this. We need people like you and me who just step up and do a little bit something.
Exactly. While we're on the financial end of it, what percentage of the donations go to providing assistance to somebody in Syria or the Philippines or wherever?
Yeah, if you make a donation today, then 10% goes to admin costs, and the other 90% of each dollar go directly into the field to the humanitarian operation. So it's a very lean program. And it's so interesting. We had a few months ago a real crisis that we had to stop for a couple of weeks. Our food assistance, our voucher programs to the Syrian refugees, because it's one of those really underfunded crises. Every single week we have to raise for Syria alone just $40 million. I mean, think of that. You know, it will take $1.5 billion this year to take care of only the Syria crisis. And we had a big social media campaign. People really helped. Governments stepped in, and within 72 hours, we raised over $80 million or so, both from people like you and me, but also governments who help. So it's amazing. So if anybody watches out here and watches where the taxpayer money is going from the US, it's well spent, it's worth every dime, and we get it to the people who need it. Nothing gets lost.
Have you seen the total number of recipients go up over the past couple of years? We see that fighting starts and stops in South Sudan. We see that other areas that before had been pretty tranquil have started to erupt it from time to time. Are you dealing with pretty much the same population, or is it getting, is it growing?
It changes from year to year. It really depends on where the crises are. But for the first time now, we have it that there are 5 big crises happening at the same time that are really difficult, really complex, really challenging. Take our best people. We are, you know, in Syria, in Iraq, in South Sudan, Central African Republic, and then the Ebola crisis. And the interesting thing is, if you think of those 5 countries, 4 of those are man-made conflicts. Interesting that they don't call it woman-made, isn't it? So it's a man-made conflict, which means they don't need to happen. Ebola was a crisis, is a crisis where, you know, it's a health crisis. It's something where we had to step up to the plate and do something differently than we usually do. But the other ones are wars and conflicts that really don't have to happen anymore. Think of South Sudan, you know, 2-3 years ago, so much hope when this country, the newest country in the United Nations, when they were showing up here at the UN and putting their little nameplates out. After the, you know, we all had worked for decades to rebuild this country, to bring up, you know, to end hunger there and to bring peace to a country, and then everything blows up again. Extremely depressing and frustrating. But you know, we humanitarians and we at the World Food Program, we are the eternal optimists. We keep on going ahead and we keep on fighting. Hunger is something that is solvable. Our goal in the world is zero hunger. And we can do that in our lifetime. And that's what we're working for every single day.
Not to get too technical, but you brought up 2 good points, many points, but the one you mentioned, hunger. How do you, what is the difference between hunger and malnutrition? Do they go hand in hand? Yeah,
they go hand in hand. I mean, you know, the thing is, what we're fighting for is, especially when you look at the children, if children don't get good, healthy, nutritious food in the first 1,000 days of their life, first in the womb of the mother, and then the first 2 years of their life, that damage is irreversible. They will never be as smart, as healthy, as productive as other healthy children. And that is one of the biggest things that we are tackling nowadays, to make sure that especially small children get good, healthy, nutritious meals. And we've developed special products to make sure that especially small children get that kind of nutrition. And we have this whole big program that it starts with, you know, the little babies. We do it with the teenage girls so that they are ready to be good, you know, healthy mothers should they become pregnant. We have special nutritional food for, you know, nursing moms, so, you know, that they can take care of the baby. We make sure that little kids under 2 get plumpy nut and all kinds of other special products that have all the nutrients that they need. And then, of course, in these disasters where we are working, you know, and all over the place, you love this, the high energy biscuits. When there's a natural disaster, these biscuits have all of the nutrients a person needs. Usually, to be technical, you need to have like 2,200 calories a day. So you need a couple of these biscuits here, and you are set, and you save somebody's lives who has been, for example, hit by a typhoon or a hurricane and can't cook anymore. We give out these high energy biscuits, and they are safe. And then the other thing what we have developed with private sector partners are micronutrient powders. So you can have beans or rice or something like this. You sprinkle some of this micronutrient powder on the food, and you will have the healthiest meal possible, you know, with something little. It's amazing. It costs a few cents. So there's amazing stuff that is happening now to beat hunger and malnutrition.
Exactly. So if a refugee is in a war zone in Syria, all that person needs is 2 or 3 of these biscuits per day to stay alive.
We do, yeah, in natural disasters, because they might not be able to cook.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, we have started really new programs, for example, in the refugee camps for Syrians. You know, people like you and me, they were doctors, pharmacists, teachers in Syria. Then this violent conflict broke out. And of course, you know, almost 3 million people have fled into the neighboring countries. So what we have been doing is with one of our corporate partners, MasterCard. We basically give the refugees in the refugee camps little credit cards. For every person, you get, you know, $17 or $30 per month per person. And then the refugees can go shopping. We built the supermarkets in the refugee camps so that they can buy the food that they want. It's a really efficient way. Not only do we pump a lot of money into the local economies, you know, these host countries have been so generous taking in so many refugees, but they're really stretched to the limits. And so with this kind of program, with these cash and voucher programs, we support the host countries. We help the refugees so they can determine what they want to eat. And for us, it's easier to do these kind of cash and voucher and e-card programs because we don't have to schlep the food from halfway around the world. We just utilize what's on the ground there and what local farmers want to sell. So they are really revolutionary ways of how we can work faster, how we can be more efficient, and how we can come up with sustainable solutions.
Which is very, very important. It certainly is.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, when you were talking about that, you mentioned the ration program. Do you do the Food for Work program? Is that one of your one of the programs that you use to get people involved to rebuild their area or to develop it? How does that work?
Yeah, and it's one of those ways how you build resilience of communities, how you build infrastructure of communities. Just think very practically. If you are somewhere in a village in Afghanistan, where I have been to, you know, we sometimes, for example, pay the local population with food and then use their workforce, bring other partners in, and build roads, for example, so that various villages can get connected, that women have roads to then be transported to hospitals when they give birth. We pay them, for example, to build water lines. We pay people with food for their work, for terracing projects in areas that have been hit by, you know, hurricanes or flooding, so that there's terracing going on. We help them and use their workforce, for example, in places like South Sudan, where the World Food Programme built 2,500 kilometers, that's what, 1,800 miles of roads. We just built roads so that people would have a chance again to connect from village to village, to go over those roads and sell their products on the markets, of just rebuilding their lives. You know, this is one of the things, we have to make people more resilient. so they can recover quickly from natural disasters, that they have a chance to rebuild their lives after wars, after droughts, anything, so that they don't need us anymore. That's the goal. We want to work ourselves out of business. We want to make sure families, communities, villages, countries are self-reliant and don't need the UN anymore.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. Our viewers are encouraged to go to www.globalconnectionstelevision.com and to comment on this program or previous shows. As also, we would encourage you to make recommendations for future programs, topics, and speakers. Today, we're looking at the United Nations World Food Program, and my guest today is an expert on the World Food Program, is Bettina Luescher. Bettina Luescher is the spokeswoman for the United Nations World Food Program. Bettina, we're talking about the situation in, well, several dangerous areas, South Sudan, wherever. Before we leave Syria, this is really quite a tribute to the World Food Program, because there are so many different militias operating in that country. There's so much mistrust, distrust, hatred amongst various groups. But the fact that you can move amongst the different elements there who really may not like one another, but at least let you come in, that is really remarkable, that you have that neutrality to move around in that area. I know it's a challenge, and you, as you said, some of your people get injured and come under fire, but that's really remarkable you can do that.
Yeah, and you know, there's still many areas where we don't have access to. It's not that we can go to all of these places. There are many areas in Syria where people have not received any assistance because they're in areas where we can't get to, or we only can get to them, you know, once every few months or so. There was a famous ambush in the old city of Homs in February of 2014, and it was just such a horrendous situation. You know, this old city of Homs, there were thousands of people. They had been under siege for, I think, 600 days or something like this. People had run out of food, you know. At a certain point, they were just eating grass anymore. You could lift grown men because they only weighed, you know, like 80 pounds or so. Children starved there, and our people, together with our UN colleagues, negotiated a ceasefire after many weeks of negotiations, then went in, brought in food, got under ambush, you know, came out again, came in again, and escorted hundreds of old men and women and children out. And I will never forget those pictures where you had these white UN trucks from WFP and the UN and the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and other partners, you know, coming out there, and in the middle, hunched over, were these people who had been under siege for hundreds of days. And we got them out into safety and were able to help them. And this is the kind of stuff you never, ever forget. I was, you know, here in safety in New York. Nothing happens to me. All that happens to me here is that I get run over by a bus outside of the UN building.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But, you know, I've got so much, I mean, such awe of my colleagues on the ground who keep on going and do just amazing works together with all of the other UN colleagues, whether it's UNHCR, the refugee people, or UNICEF to take care of the children, whether it's the peacekeepers. They're real heroes there. You know, often when I watch American television, we just watch the Super Bowl and they're all heroes, and it's like, great. But you know, the real heroes are out on the front lines and doing something totally different and not just throw a ball. I don't think it will ever get invited to free tickets for the Super Bowl.
You never know. You never know. You bring a very interesting point in how the media cover this situation in Syria.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think back to when the Security Council couldn't come to an agreement. There was wrangling going on, and it seemed like that not all, but a large part, the majority of the U.S. media in particular, were fixated on the Security Council, and they just totally overlooked what your folks were doing in the field with the World Food Program, what the High Commission for Refugees people were doing, the UN Children's Fund, the World Health Organization. You had these frontline workers, UN workers, right in harm's way, helping to move 1 million, 2 million Syrians out of the line of fire, and they got very little publicity. It seems like the Security Council and the General Assembly get the lion's share of it, or that's where the media go. It's not, I'm not blaming the Security Council for it, but it seems like you're overlooked by the media to some degree.
Well, I think, you know, from the international correspondence, there has been a lot of coverage of Syria.
International correspondence, right.
And yeah, and you know, it's a different game. Here in New York, we focus much more on the political things. And when I try to explain to what the Security Council says and does, and it's not my field of expertise, but I say, you know, it's basically like you have your family over for Thanksgiving, you know, and they either get along or they don't get along. If they get along and they come up with solutions together and they all agree, like at Thanksgiving, whether they like your food and they're peaceful, then amazing things can happen. That's the political side of it, and crucially important. We, on the humanitarian side, of course, depend on some of those political agreements and need those, but we are also have a reputation to stay out of the politics. We need to stay out of the politics. We can operate in over 70 countries because no matter who runs those countries, they know that we are neutral, we are humanitarian. All we want is help hungry men, women, and children who cannot help themselves.
I was talking about the U.S. media in particular a moment ago, but it just dawned on me too. I remember, I think it was back in January, I believe, that 60 Minutes, which is a major news program on Sunday evenings in the United States, they did a really, what I thought was an excellent piece on the UN World Food Program and the challenges that you encountered in Syria. And I think they wanted to focus on Syrians, but your agency was so involved with them that they brought it all together. I don't know if you saw that or not, but Scott...
I worked on it for a year.
Oh, you did? Well, you know more about it than I do. Then I just watched it.
No, and it's like, I can only say thank you to them. I mean, 60 Minutes,
did Scott Pelley do
there.
That?
Yes, Scott Pelley went in there, and he had a fantastic team. You know, the people who make all of that happen, the producers are fantastic people, and their camera crews, and they went in. And our people on the ground, we've got a fantastic media team in those countries that help them get to the right people and then tell the story. And of course, our executive director was in there too. But it gave you a real sense of the hardship that refugees go through. I mean, you know, they walk through the desert and you know, they risk their lives. The women push their children onto the trucks to make sure that at least their children are safe. Sometimes families get split up, and then you hope that they find each other again in the refugee camps. So it's if you really want to get a sense to it, go to the CBS 60 Minutes website and take a look at it. It's heartbreaking to see because it could happen to any of us. You know, you and I are lucky. We sit here in New York. If we were born in some other place, somewhere halfway around the world, we could be sitting in a refugee camp. We could be living in the middle of a war zone. And that's what I always tell, you know, I talk to a lot of school children. You know, the lack of the lottery, where you're born and what chances in life you have. And what we at the UN do and at the World Food Program is we try to make the world a better place. It's that simple. It might sound corny, but this is what we're doing every single day. We try to make the world a better place. So people have food so they can learn and study and concentrate. We want to make sure that women can feed their families. We want to make sure that their children don't have to be taken out of school and become prostitutes or work on the street somewhere. We want to make sure that people have a chance in peace, and that's what the UN is doing, and that's what the World Food Program is doing. It's very simple, it's very basic, and it's incredibly challenging, but it can be done. I mean, I'm a real optimist. We can end hunger in our lifetime. There's enough food produced in the world. We just have to make sure that people can get access to it.
Exactly. Well, you've mentioned so many of the places you're operating today. I think back to Haiti. I guess it was January 12th, 2010, that horrific earthquake had really demolished about 80% of Port-au-Prince and large areas within that area, that part of the country. But you had the earthquake. The UN World Food Program was on the ground very shortly, or may have been there even before or during the earthquake. You saw a few years ago the typhoon Haiyan that devastated the Philippines. What are some of the lessons learned? I know each disaster probably is the same, but it's different too. What are some of the lessons that WFP has learned over the years, because you are the preeminent agency dealing with these disasters?
Well, we are in all of these places already on the ground. When the Philippines typhoon struck, our people knew it was coming. We're waiting. We were there within the first planes to that specific part of the country, you know, got in the first elite teams who started all the work and got something going really, really quickly. When the Haiti Quake happened, our people were in Port-au-Prince, in the capital. They were all over the country. We've been there for 30 years or so. And they became homeless, many of them, had damaged houses, got up the next morning, and within 2 weeks or so, we're feeding 4 million Haitians. I think there are always ways of how you can improve things. A lot of logistical expertise. We bring that to the front, you know, having these humanitarian response depots that we run on behalf of the UN in strategic places all over the world, so that we are very quickly in these disaster areas. And these depots have everything from mobile warehouses to mobile office boxes to motorbikes to food to satellite phones to the emergency telecoms that we're doing on behalf of the UN. So we can throw something very, very quickly at a disaster area, and we can help all of the aid communities step up very, very quickly. When Ebola, for example, happened in Guinea, for example, it was declared in March, and within 9 days we had the first food, you know, distributions in the affected areas. And when there was a big, gigantic international response, they just simply could use our humanitarian response depots because they were already there, and use them as staging areas. So, for example, what we did on the Ebola front is we flew all of the aid workers in with the UN Humanitarian Air Service that we are running for everybody, for all the aid workers, not just the UN, but also the non-governmental organizations. So we stepped up and we're building, you know, the hospitals, the treatment centers. We got the engineers in, we got the trucks in to bring them to the far-fetched corners when there were outbreaks at other parts of the country, no longer in the capitals. And that is what we're doing, while also in all the Ebola-affected countries, by now we have fed more than 2.7 million people. So we do a lot of logistical muscle, plus the food work, plus the emergency telecoms. And you always get better. It's like being at school. You always get better. You learn new tricks. You work, the cooperation gets better and better, so that every aid organization and every NGO knows where to go, what to do, how to communicate, how to be really fast and efficient. And, you know, we threw some of our best people at it, people who had done many disasters, and were quickly able to set up a big aid operation.
Well, you mentioned you have the workers, you have the expertise to do this. You do need contributions, you need funding. You had a very unique partnership a few years ago, as I recall. Did you have with various private sector groups like Yum's Food, different groups like that? Or you still have that?
Always.
How does that work?
Private sector companies are our 10th largest donors. They, like last year, they gave us over $100 million. And it works, you know, with MasterCard. They give us the technical expertise, how to run something with e-cards. Yum has donated by now, has raised over $100 million for us by having big fundraising campaigns all over the world, and there's 33,000 restaurants all over the world, where Christina Aguilera is the star and helping. We have a partnership with Michael Kors, for example, the fashion designer, and Halle Berry is involved in that. where we raise funds and awareness, but also companies like DSM or so that developed these kind of nutritional products. Partly it's giving money, partly it's expertise, so that they're partners on the ground when disasters strike.
Well, Bettina Luescher, is a very important topic, and I'm so delighted that you brought us up to date on the UN World Food Program. And I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Bill. Thank you for having me.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.